Hey guys! Tonight we're slipping into the warm, dusty air of ancient Egypt, where the Nile River pulses like a heartbeat under a sky prickling with stars. Picture yourself barefoot on the riverbank, the water lapping at your toes, its surface glinting with reflections of a million tiny lights overhead. The air smells of wet reeds and distant cook fires, and somewhere nearby, a priest is squinting at the horizon, muttering about a star called Sirius. This is no ordinary night. You're about to unravel how Egyptian priests used the stars to predict the Nile's floods, a rhythm so vital that screwing it up could starve a kingdom. Spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive a season as their apprentice, with all the math and sleepless stargazing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the edge of the Nile, and it's not just a river, it's Egypt's lifeline. Every year, it swells, dumping rich, chocolatey silt across the fields, turning barren dust into farmland. Without this flood, crops wither, bellies growl, and the whole civilization teeters. But here's the kicker. The Nile doesn't just flood on a whim. Its rhythm, ancient Egyptians believed, was tied to the stars. You glance up and the sky feels impossibly vast, like a black linen sheet poked through with glowing pins. The priests, those overworked nerds of the ancient world, figured out that one star, Sirius, the brightest in the sky, held the key. Its first dawn appearance after months of hiding, called the Heliacal Rising, was like a cosmic alarm clock for the flood. Historians say this connection was nailed down by 2700 BCE, making it one of humanity's earliest stabs at astronomy. Now, you're not just gawking at the water, you're picking up on the vibe of the locals, farmers, potters, even the kids splashing nearby. They all know the flood's coming, but no one's sure exactly when. The priests, though, they're obsessed. You spot one, a wiry guy with a shaved head, pacing by a palm tree, clutching a reed pen like it's his lifeline. He's muttering about Sirius, and you can't help but smirk. Imagine explaining to him that his sacred star is just a ball of gas 8.6 light years away. He'd probably sacrifice you to a crocodile. Speaking of which, here's a quirky tidbit. Some priests used crocodile dung paste as a sunscreen during long nights of stargazing. No joke. Ancient texts mention it as a divine balm. Bet it smelled divine, too. You wander closer to the riverbank where the air's thick with anticipation. The flood's timing isn't just about planting crops, it's about survival, taxes, even the pharaoh's ego. If the priests get it wrong, the whole system wobbles. Historians still argue whether the priests' star-watching was pure science or half religion, since they wrapped every observation in prayers to gods like Osiris. You're starting to feel the weight of it. The Nile's not just water, it's a cosmic deal. The stars, the river, the people, they're all tangled up. You kick at the sand, wondering how anyone kept track of this without coffee or a calculator. The priest glares at you, like he knows you're slacking. Time to move closer to the action. The village around you is buzzing, but it's a slow, sleepy buzz. Torches flicker, casting wobbly shadows on mud brick walls. You hear a donkey bray, and somewhere, a woman singing a lullaby that sounds older than the pyramids. It's easy to forget this is high-stakes stuff. The flood's timing could make or break a year. You're drawn to a small stone platform where another priest is setting up what looks like a sundial, but for stars. He's aligning it with the horizon, and you realize this is where the real work happens. The priests don't just watch Sirius, they measure its arc, its timing, its vibe. You're starting to get why this feels like a ritual as much as a calculation. The Nile's flood isn't just a river thing. It's a star thing, a god thing, a you better not mess this up thing. You're trailing behind that wiry priest now, his sandal slapping the packed earth as he heads toward a low mud brick building near the Nile. The night's cooling off, but the air's still heavy, like a damp blanket, and you're swatting at a mosquito that's decided your dinner. The priest doesn't notice, he's too busy scanning the sky, his eyes locked on the horizon where Sirius is supposed to pop up any day now. You're about to see how these ancient stargazers turned their obsession with this star into a flood-predicting machine. It's not exactly thrilling, but there's something soothing about their focus, like watching someone solve a puzzle in slow motion. The building you're approaching is a sort of priestly HQ, its walls etched with faint carvings of stars and reeds. Inside, it's dim, lit by flickering oil lamps that smell like burnt herbs. You're hit with the mainstream fact. By 2500 BCE, Egyptian priests had figured out that Sirius's heliacal rising, its first pre-dawn appearance after being invisible for 70 days, coincided with the Nile's flood. This wasn't just a lucky guess. They tracked it for generations, building a calendar with 365 days, one of the earliest in history. You're standing where they did this, and it's wild to think they pulled it off with no telescopes, just sharp eyes and a lot of patience. The priest kneels by a stone slab, muttering to himself as he adjusts a wooden rod propped against a notch. This is a merket, a simple but clever tool for tracking stars. You're tempted to nudge it just to see if he'd flip out, but you don't. Those crocodile dung sunscreen vibes are still lingering in your mind. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests wore amulets shaped like tiny hippos, believing they'd ward off errors in their star measurements. Apparently, hippos were linked to the goddess Taweret, who supposedly kept chaos at bay. You're picturing this guy clutching a hippo charm while squinting at the sky, and it's honestly kind of endearing. You're starting to get the rhythm of their work. Every night, these priests, called hour watchers, take turns staring at the horizon, waiting for Sirius to blink into view. They're not just looking, they're measuring angles, noting positions, and scribbling on papyrus. You peek over the priest's shoulder and see rows of tiny wedges and dots, their version of a spreadsheet. It's tedious, and you're already yawning, which is probably why this feels so sleep-friendly. Historians still argue whether these priests fully understood the astronomy behind Sirius's cycle, or if they just leaned hard into the religious side, chanting to the star like it was a god. Either way, their system worked well enough to keep Egypt fed. The priest glances at you, his face all shadows and focus, and you feel a little guilty for zoning out. You wander to the edge of the room, where a clay jar holds more papyrus rolls. The air smells faintly of ink and dust, and you can hear the Nile outside, lapping softly. It's easy to imagine spending nights here, lulled by the priest's low murmurs and the river's hum. But there's pressure too. If they misjudge Sirius's rising, the flood could catch farmers off guard, or worse, not come at all. You're starting to see why they're so intense. The priest stands, stretching his back with a groan, and heads outside to check the sky again. You follow, your sandals scuffing the dirt, wondering how they stayed awake without caffeine. Outside, the village is quieter now, just the occasional dog bark and the rustle of palm fronds. The horizon's a thin line of indigo, and you're squinting, trying to spot Sirius yourself. No luck, you're no priest, but you're hooked on the idea that this one star, this tiny speck, could steer a whole civilization. The priest points to a spot low in the sky, like he's sharing a secret, and you nod, pretending you see it. There's a joke bubbling up. If these guys had Wi-Fi, they'd probably be tweeting, "Sirius is late, send help," every flood season. You keep it to yourself, though. The priest doesn't look like he's in the mood for your modern sass. You're back in the warm Egyptian night, trailing the priest as he shuffles toward a looming stone structure, its silhouette sharp against the starry sky. The Nile's a dark ribbon to your left, its soft ripples catching flickers of moonlight. You're still swatting at that persistent mosquito, but the priest's too focused to care, his eyes darting between the horizon and the temple ahead. This isn't just any building, it's a sacred space, built to mirror the cosmos, and you're about to see how its design helped priests tie the Nile's floods to the stars. The air smells of baked earth and incense, and there's a hush that makes you want to whisper, like you're sneaking into a library after hours. You step through a massive doorway, and the temple's interior feels like a cave, cool and shadowed. Torches sputter in brackets, casting wobbly light on walls carved with gods and constellations. Here's the mainstream fact. Temples like this, especially in places like Karnak by 2000 BCE, were often aligned with celestial events, like Sirius's heliacal rising, to mark the flood season. The priests didn't just guess where to point the walls. They used precise measurements, lining up doorways and obelisks with key stars. You're standing in a space that's basically a giant star clock, and it's kind of mind-boggling how they pulled it off with just ropes and wooden rods. The priest gestures at a long corridor, its axis pointing toward the horizon. You squint and imagine Sirius peeking through like a VIP guest at a cosmic party. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some temples had tiny light wells in their roofs, designed to let a single star's beam hit a specific altar at dawn. Priests would stand there, probably feeling all holy, as Sirius's light grazed their toes. You're picturing it now, and it's half majestic, half absurd, like a divine laser pointer. You stifle a chuckle because the priest's giving you a side-eye, like he knows you're not taking this seriously. You wander deeper, your sandals scuffing on the stone floor. The corridor's lined with carvings of Osiris and Isis, their eyes seeming to follow you. The priests believed the Nile's flood was a gift from these gods, triggered by Sirius's return. You're starting to see the temple as more than a building. It's a stage for a cosmic drama, where stars and rivers play the leads. Historians still argue whether the temple alignments were purely practical or mostly symbolic, a way to flex divine approval for the pharaoh's rule. Either way, standing here, you feel the weight of it. Every angle, every carving, was meant to keep the Nile's rhythm in sync with the sky. The priest pauses by a small alcove where a clay tablet sits, etched with star positions. He's checking it against the sky outside, muttering something about 2 fingers above the horizon. You're tempted to ask what happens if he's off by a finger, but you don't. Last thing you need is a lecture in ancient Egyptian. Instead, you lean against a pillar, its surface cool under your palm, and let the temple's quiet sink in. It's easy to imagine drifting off here, lulled by the priest's low chants and the distant lap of the Nile. But there's a buzz, too. The flood's coming, and this temple's the nerve center for predicting it. You're starting to get why they built it so grand. You glance at the priest who's now kneeling, aligning a wooden tool with a carved notch. He's dead serious, but you can't help a quiet joke to yourself. If these guys had an app for this, they'd probably call it Nile Flood Pro. The thought makes you smirk, and the priest shoots you another look, like he's sensing your sarcasm. You straighten up, trying to look respectful, and follow him toward a courtyard open to the sky. The stars are brighter now, and you're wondering if Sirius is about to make its big entrance. The temple's walls seem to hum with purpose, and you're hooked, ready to see what happens when the star and the flood finally align. You're out in the temple courtyard now, the night air soft against your skin, carrying the faint scent of Nile water and blooming lotus. The stars overhead are so sharp they feel like they could prick you, and you're squinting at the eastern horizon, where the priest is staring like his life depends on it. He's waiting for Sirius, that one star that's got all of Egypt on edge. You're about to dive into why this star, called Sopdet by the locals, was the flood season's golden ticket. The courtyard's quiet, just the occasional scuff of the priest's sandals and a distant owl hooting. It's the kind of calm that makes your eyelids heavy, perfect for drifting off, but you're too curious to zone out just yet. Here's the mainstream fact. Sirius's heliacal rising, around late June or early July by our calendar, marked the start of the Nile's flood season, a pattern Egyptians tracked by 2700 BCE. When Sirius peeked over the horizon just before dawn, after being invisible for 70 days, it was like the universe hitting a reset button. The priest saw it as a signal that the Nile would soon swell, dumping silt to feed the fields. You're standing where they stood, and it's wild to think they nailed this cycle without a single computer. Just eyes, patience, and a knack for patterns. The priest points to the horizon, his finger steady, and you try to follow his gaze. Sirius isn't up yet, but you can feel the anticipation, like waiting for a tardy guest. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests believed Sirius was the goddess Isis in star form, crying tears that made the Nile rise. They'd offer her tiny cakes shaped like stars, hoping to keep her happy. You're picturing this guy baking cosmic cupcakes, and it's hard not to grin. Bet they tasted better than that crocodile dung sunscreen you heard about back by the riverbank. You shift your weight, your sandals gritty with courtyard dust, and let the scene sink in. The priests didn't just watch Sirius for kicks. Their whole society leaned on it. If they missed the stars rising or misread its timing, farmers might plant too early or too late, and the harvest would tank. You're starting to get why they were so intense about it. Historians still argue whether the Sirius flood link was mostly astronomical or wrapped in religious mysticism, since every observation came with prayers and offerings. Standing here, you're betting it was both science and faith, tangled up like reeds in the Nile. The priest mutters something, probably a prayer, and adjusts his stance. You're tempted to ask if he's ever seen Sirius pull a no-show, but you keep quiet. Those hippo amulets from the last section make you think he's not in the mood for jokes. Instead, you wander to the courtyard's edge, where a low wall gives you a clear view of the river. It's calm now, but you can imagine it surging, turning the fields into a muddy mirror of the sky. There's a joke bubbling up. If Sirius was a celebrity, it'd have the worst agent, showing up once a year for a flood gig. You smirk, but the priest's focus pulls you back. You lean against the wall, the stone cool under your palms, and let the night's rhythm settle over you. The courtyard feels like a stage, with Sirius as the star, pun intended, about to take center. The priest's job was to catch that moment, to read the sky's script and tell everyone when to grab their plows. You're starting to see Sirius not just as a dot of light, but as Egypt's heartbeat, pulsing in time with the Nile. The priest glances at you, his face half lit by a torch, and you nod, like you're in on the secret. You're not, really, but you're hooked, ready to see how this starry signal plays out. You're still in the temple courtyard, but now you're following the priest to a small, shadowed corner, where a couple of scribes are hunched over a low table, their reed pens scratching like crickets. The Nile's soft gurgle hums in the distance, and the air's thick with the scent of ink and papyrus. Overhead, the stars are doing their slow dance, but down here, it's all about turning those twinkles into something useful. A star map to predict the Nile's flood. You're about to see how these scribes, the unsung nerds of ancient Egypt, etched the sky's secrets to keep the flood season on track. It's tedious work, and you're already feeling a yawn coming on, which is honestly perfect for this sleepy vibe. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2500 BCE, Egyptian scribes were creating detailed star charts, recording Sirius's movements and other celestial markers to build a 365-day calendar that synced with the Nile's floods. These weren't just pretty drawings. They were practical tools, used to tell farmers when to prep their fields. You're peering over a scribe's shoulder, watching him sketch tiny wedges and dots on a papyrus sheet, each mark a star's position. It's like watching someone code a spreadsheet, but with way more dust and no coffee breaks. The scribe dips his pen in a clay ink pot, and you notice his fingers are stained black, like he's been at this for hours. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some scribes chewed on licorice root to stay awake during late-night charting sessions, believing it sharpened their focus. You're imagining this guy munching away, looking like he's auditioning for an ancient energy drink ad, and it's quietly hilarious. Bet it didn't smell as bad as that crocodile dung sunscreen you keep circling back to, though. You lean closer, trying not to sneeze from the papyrus dust. The chart's a mess of lines and symbols, but to the scribes, it's a roadmap for the Nile's rhythm. They're plotting Sirius's heliacal rising, cross-referencing it with other stars to confirm the flood's timing. You're starting to get why this was high stakes. Miss a mark, and the whole planting season could flop. Historians still argue whether these star charts were purely mathematical or laced with divine mumbo-jumbo, since every scroll was blessed with prayers to Thoth, the god of wisdom. Standing here, you're guessing it's a mix. Hard math wrapped in holy vibes. The scribe glances up, his eyes bleary, and you feel a pang of sympathy. You're tempted to offer him a nap, but you don't. Those hippo amulets from the priestly HQ are still fresh in your mind, and you're not messing with their chaos-warding mojo. Instead, you wander to the table's edge, where another scribe's double-checking a chart against a clay tablet. The air's heavy with focus, and you can hear the Nile outside, its rhythm a quiet reminder of why they're burning the midnight oil. There's a joke tickling you. If these guys had a union, they'd be striking for better lighting and fewer mosquito bites. You keep it to yourself, though. The scribe's glare says he's not here for your sass. You step back, letting the scribe's murmurs blend with the night's hum. The star charts are more than scribbles. They're Egypt's lifeline, tying the sky to the soil. You're picturing farmers out there, waiting for the priests to read these charts and give the green light. The scribe's work feels like a bridge between the stars and the Nile, and you're hooked, wondering how they kept it all straight without losing their minds. The priest from earlier brushes past, checking the scribe's progress, and you follow his gaze to the horizon. Sirius is still hiding, but the charts are ready, and you're ready to see what's next in this cosmic countdown. You're trailing the priest again, this time weaving through the temple's outer courtyard toward a raised platform where a small crowd's gathering under the starlit sky. The Nile's a dark shimmer in the distance, its scent of wet earth mingling with the faint smoke of torches. You're brushing off papyrus dust from those scribes' charts, still marveling at their starry math, when you hear a deep voice booming from the platform. It's a royal messenger, decked out in a linen kilt and a leopard skin sash, reading a pharaoh's decree about the Nile's flood. You're about to find out how the pharaoh tied his authority to the stars and the river's surge. The crowd's hushed, and the night's calm wraps you like a blanket, perfect for dozing, but you're too curious to drift off yet. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2600 BCE, pharaohs like those of the Old Kingdom claimed their rule was divinely linked to the Nile's floods, using priests' star observations to time royal decrees for planting and festivals. The pharaoh wasn't just a king. He was a cosmic middleman, supposedly chatting with gods like Osiris to keep the floods on schedule. You're standing among villagers, farmers, weavers, a kid clutching a reed toy, who are hanging on the messenger's every word. The decree's all about preparing for the flood, now that Sirius's rising is near, and it's clear the pharaoh's flexing his starry clout. The messenger unrolls a papyrus scroll, his voice steady but dramatic, like he's auditioning for an ancient TED Talk. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some decrees included bizarre royal gifts, like jars of honey blessed under Sirius's light, handed out to priests for flood luck. You're picturing this priest from earlier, the one with the hippo amulet, awkwardly juggling honey jars, and it's hard not to smirk. Bet it was stickier than that crocodile dung sunscreen you can't stop thinking about. The crowd murmurs, impressed, and you're starting to see how the pharaoh's word turned starry math into a kingdom-wide pep rally. You edge closer, your sandals crunching on gravel. The decree's not just pomp, it's practical. Ordering canals cleared and fields prepped before the Nile's surge. The pharaoh's banking on the priest's Sirius sightings, and you're feeling the pressure secondhand. If the stars don't deliver, or the priest's goof, the pharaoh's divine rep takes a hit. Historians still argue whether these decrees were genuine cosmic coordination or just political theater to keep the masses in line. Standing here, you're leaning toward both. The pharaoh needed the flood to work, but he also needed everyone to think he was the god's BFF. You glance at the priest who's nodding along, his face all serious business. You're tempted to whisper, "What if Sirius ghosts us?" But you don't. Those licorice-chewing scribes from the last section would probably faint at your nerve. Instead, you soak in the scene. Torchlight flickering, the crowd's quiet buzz, the Nile's steady hum. There's a joke tickling you. If the pharaoh had a slogan, it'd be, "Trust in us, we've got Sirius." You swallow a chuckle, not wanting to draw glares. The messenger wraps up, promising blessings if the flood's bountiful, and the crowd disperses, whispering about the coming deluge. You're starting to feel the Nile's rhythm, like a pulse tying the stars, the pharaoh, and the people together. You linger by the platform, the priest now chatting with a guard about canal repairs. The stars above feel closer, like they're eavesdropping on this whole cosmic deal. You're hooked on how the pharaoh's decree weaves Sirius's rising into Egypt's daily grind, making a distant star feel like a neighbor. The priest catches your eye, maybe sensing you're not just a gawker, and points toward the fields beyond the temple. That's where the real work's about to start, where the starry flood meets the dirt. You nod, ready to see how this plays out on the ground. You're trudging away from the temple now, following a dirt path toward the fields that hug the Nile's banks. The night air's cooler, laced with the muddy tang of river silt and the faint sweetness of crushed reeds. Your sandals sink slightly into the soft earth, and you're dodging puddles left from an earlier overflow. The pharaoh's decree still echoes in your head, all that talk of cosmic favor and flood prep. But out here, it's less about stars and more about dirt. You're about to see how farmers, the real backbone of Egypt, get ready for the Nile's starry surge. The sky's a glittering dome above, but the ground's a gritty reality check, and the sleepy vibe of their work is already lulling you. Here's the mainstream fact. Around 2500 BCE, Egyptian farmers relied on the priest's Sirius-based flood predictions to time their field prep, digging canals and piling mud levees to control the Nile's surge. Without this, the flood's silt, the black gold that made Egypt's crops legendary, could wash away or miss their fields entirely. You're slogging alongside a farmer, his hands caked with clay, as he checks a canal's edge with a wooden spade. He's not thinking about Sirius or the pharaoh. He's just hoping the water hits right, and you're feeling his quiet focus, like a slow heartbeat in the dark. The farmer mutters about the soil, pointing out a patch that's too sandy. You nod, pretending you get it, but you're distracted by a quirky tidbit. Some farmers tied tiny reed charms to their tools, believing they'd call the flood's silt, a trick passed down from grandmas who swore by it. You're picturing this guy weaving straw hearts for his spade, like he's crafting for an ancient Etsy shop, and it's quietly adorable. Beats that crocodile dung sunscreen vibe from way back by the riverbank, that's for sure. You smirk, but the farmer's too busy to notice. You pause by a levee, your hands brushing the rough mud wall. The fields stretch out, patchwork squares waiting for the Nile to paint them fertile. The farmer's work is backbreaking, digging, piling, praying the priest's starry math doesn't flop. If the flood's late or weak, these fields stay dust, and hunger creeps in. Historians still argue whether farmers fully trusted the priest's predictions or leaned on their own gut, watching river levels and bird migrations. Standing here, you're betting it's a mix. The priests had the stars, but the farmers had the dirt under their nails. You're tempted to ask the farmer if he's got a backup plan, but his tired grunt says he's not up for chit-chat. Instead, you wander along the canal, its water sluggish but hinting at the surge to come. The air's thick with effort, and you can hear distant voices, other farmers maybe, joking about sore backs. There's a joke of your own bubbling up. If these fields had a Yelp review, it'd be 5 stars, but only when Sirius shows up. You keep it to yourself, not wanting to jinx the mood. The farmer kneels, testing the soil again, and you're struck by how his work grounds all the temple's cosmic hype. The stars might signal the flood, but these fields are where it lands. You lean against a palm tree, its bark rough under your palm, and let the night's rhythm settle. The Nile's close, its ripples catching starlight, and the fields feel alive, waiting. You're starting to see the farmers as the unsung heroes, turning the priest's starry whispers into bread and beer. The farmer glances at you, maybe wondering why you're still here, and points toward the village where torches bob like fireflies. That's where the flood's impact will hit next, where hope and hard work collide. You nod, ready to follow the Nile's starry promise into the lives it shapes. You're ambling toward the village now, the fields fading behind you as the path narrows, lined with scruffy tamarisk bushes. The Nile's scent clings to the air, muddy and alive, mixed with the faint smoke of cook fires. Your sandals crunch on gravel, and the stars above feel like old friends, especially Sirius, still hiding but looming large in everyone's minds. You're about to dive into the myths that tied the Nile's floods to the gods, stories that made farmers and priests see the river as a cosmic gift. The village ahead glows faintly with torchlight, and the sleepy hum of voices pulls you in, like a lullaby you can't resist. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2600 BCE, Egyptians wove the Nile's floods into their mythology, believing gods like Osiris and Isis controlled the river's surge, with Sirius's rising as their divine signal. Osiris, the god of fertility and rebirth, was said to die and revive each year, his resurrection mirrored by the flood's life-giving silt. You're passing a mud brick shrine now, its walls painted with Osiris's green face, and a villager's tossing in a handful of barley as an offering. The story's not just fluff, it's how people made sense of the Nile's rhythm, tying their muddy fields to the starry sky. You pause by the shrine, catching a whiff of roasted grain. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed Isis's tears for Osiris literally caused the flood, and they'd mimic her by pouring water into tiny clay tear jars during flood season. You're picturing a kid sneaking extra water into one, hoping for a bigger flood, and it's oddly charming. Way better than that crocodile dung sunscreen vibe from the riverbank days ago, right? You smirk, but the villager's solemn nod keeps you from laughing out loud. You wander closer to the village square, where a storyteller's voice drifts, low and rhythmic, spinning tales of Isis searching the sky for Sirius, her starry beacon. The crowd's small, kids, elders, a dog snoozing in the dirt, and they're hanging on every word. The myth makes the flood feel personal, like the gods are rooting for their crops. But it's not all cozy. If the flood fails, the gods might be angry, and that's a scary thought. Historians still argue whether these myths were heartfelt beliefs or priestly propaganda to keep everyone in line. Standing here, you're guessing it's both. The stories gave hope, but they also kept the pharaoh's cosmic cred intact. You're tempted to join the crowd, but a yawn hits you, and you lean against a wall instead. Its mud brick cool against your back. The storyteller's voice is like a warm blanket, and you're starting to see why these myths stuck. They turned the Nile's flood into a divine soap opera, with Sirius as the plot twist. There's a joke tickling you. If the gods had a group chat, Isis would be spamming "Where's Sirius?" every flood season. You swallow a chuckle, not wanting to disrupt the vibe. The storyteller wraps up and the crowd scatters, whispering about the flood's coming surge. You linger, watching a woman light a lamp by the shrine, its flame dancing like a tiny star. The myths aren't just stories. They're the glue holding this village together, linking their muddy lives to the temple's starry math. You're hooked on how the Nile's flood feels like a team effort. Gods, stars, priests, farmers, all in it together. The path leads back toward the temple, where the priests are probably still squinting at the sky. You're ready to see what tools they're using to turn these myths into flood predictions, and how close Sirius is to stealing the show. You're back at the temple, the night air thick with the scent of incense and Nile mud, as you slip into a small, torchlit chamber. The stars outside are still doing their slow twirl, but in here, it's all about the priest's toolkit. Odd little gadgets they use to track Sirius and predict the Nile's flood. Your sandals scuff against the stone floor, and you're dodging a stray reed pen that's rolled into your path. The priest from earlier is here, fiddling with a wooden contraption, his face all focus and faint sweat. You're about to get a close-up of the quirky tools that turned starry winks into flood forecasts. The chamber's hum, low chants, scratching pens, feels like a lullaby, perfect for drifting off. But you're too intrigued to yawn just yet. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2500 BCE, Egyptian priests used simple but clever tools like the merket, a notched stick paired with a plumb line, to measure star positions and time Sirius's heliacal rising for flood predictions. Think of it as an ancient protractor, aligning with the horizon to catch a star's exact spot. You're watching the priest adjust his merket, lining it up with a carved marker on the wall. It's not fancy. Wood, string, a bit of grit. But it's how they pin down the Nile's cosmic rhythm, and you're quietly impressed by the low-tech genius. The priest shifts to another tool, a flat stone with curved etchings, like a proto-compass for stars. You lean in, catching a whiff of his herbal salve, mercifully not that crocodile dung sunscreen you keep circling back to. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests used star clocks, circular clay tablets with holes to track nightly star shifts, and they'd mark them with colored chalk, like kids doodling a cosmic connect the dots. You're picturing this guy, all serious, coloring his star clock like it's an ancient art project, and it's hard not to grin. The chamber's dim light makes it feel cozy, almost like a nerdy sleepover. You're starting to get the priest's vibe. Part scientist, part mystic, all exhausted. They'd stand for hours, merket in hand, waiting for Sirius to peek over the horizon. If they blinked, they might miss it, and the flood schedule could wobble. You're feeling the pressure secondhand, like forgetting your lines in a school play. Historians still argue whether these tools were precise enough to rival later Greek astronomy, or if their clunky charm leaned on divine guesswork. Standing here, you're betting it's a mix. The merket's math was solid, but the priests hedged their bets with prayers to Thoth, just in case. You're tempted to nudge the merket, see if the priest notices, but you don't. Those hippo amulets from the scribe's room are still giving you pause. Instead, you wander to a shelf where a few star clocks sit, their chalk marks smudged but legible. The air's heavy with focus, and you can hear the Nile outside. Its ripples a quiet reminder of why these tools matter. There's a joke bubbling up. If these priests had a tech startup, they'd pitch Merket 2.0, floods on fleek. You swallow a chuckle, not wanting a glare. The priest mutters something about 3 fingers low, and you're hooked, wondering how these gadgets translate into the flood's real-world impact. You lean against the wall, its stone cool under your palm, and let the chamber's rhythm settle. The tools aren't just wood and clay. They're Egypt's pulse, linking the stars to the river. You're picturing farmers out there, waiting for the priest's signal to dig or plant. The priest glances at you, maybe sensing your curiosity, and points toward the courtyard, where the flood's effects will soon hit home. You nod, ready to see how the village braces for the Nile's starry verdict, and what happens when the river finally answers the sky. You're stepping out of the temple's torchlit chamber, the cool night air hitting you like a soft wave as you head toward the village. The Nile's scent, muddy, alive, mixes with the faint char of cook fires, and your sandals crunch on the path's loose dirt. Overhead, the stars glitter, Sirius still playing hide and seek, but its rising is close, and the whole village feels it. You're about to see how the locals brace for the Nile's flood, their lives hinging on the priest's starry predictions. The village hums with low voices and the clink of clay pots, a sleepy buzz that's perfect for dozing. But you're too caught up in the flood's stakes to drift off yet. Here's the mainstream fact. Around 2500 BCE, Egyptian villages prepared for the Nile's flood based on priests' serious sightings, stockpiling grain, repairing boats, and shoring up mud brick homes against the surge. A good flood meant fat harvests. A weak one, or none, spelled hunger and tax hikes. You're weaving through the village now, passing a family stacking jars of barley in a shed. A woman, her hands dusted with flour, nods at you, her face tight with hope. They're not just waiting for water, they're betting on the priest's star math. And you're feeling the weight of their trust. You pause by a low wall where a kid's tying reeds into a makeshift raft, probably dreaming of flood-time fishing. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villagers hung dried fishtails on their doors during flood season, believing they'd call the Nile's bounty. A charm as common as those reed tool ties you saw in the fields. You're picturing this kid's mom nailing up a fishy wind chime, like it's ancient feng shui, and it's quietly hilarious. Smells better than that crocodile dung sunscreen from way back at least. You smirk, but the kid's too busy to notice, splashing in a puddle. You wander deeper, your shadow flickering in torchlight. The village is a hive of prep. Men hauling timber, women weaving baskets for grain, elders muttering about last year's flood. If the priest's serious call is off, or the flood's too wild, these homes could be swamped, or worse, left dry. Historians still argue whether villagers fully bought the priest's cosmic hype or mixed it with their own river-watching tricks, like noting frog migrations. Standing here, you're guessing it's both. The stars set the stage, but the locals know the Nile's moods better than any merket. You're tempted to ask the woman about her barley stash, but her quick glance says she's got no time for strangers. Instead, you lean against a mud brick wall, its surface warm from the day's heat, and soak in the scene. The air's thick with effort, and you hear a man joking about his leaky roof, the crowd chuckling. There's a joke of your own tickling you. If this village had a newsletter, it'd be Flood Watch. Seriously, get ready. You swallow a laugh, not wanting to stand out. The woman finishes her jars and heads off, leaving you to trail a group toward the riverbank, where the flood's verdict will hit first. You linger, the Nile's ripples catching starlight like a mirror. The village feels alive, braced for the flood's promise or its betrayal. You're starting to see the locals as the real players, turning the priest's starry whispers into survival. The path dips toward the water, where boats bob and nets are piled, ready for the surge. You're hooked on how the flood ties everyone, priests, farmers, villagers, to Sirius's glow, and you're ready to dig into the debates over how well those starry predictions actually worked. You're at the village's edge now, the Nile lapping gently a few steps away, its surface a dark mirror for the stars above. The air's heavy with the scent of wet reeds and the faint tang of fish, and your sandals are caked with mud from the riverbank. The village behind you hums with prep, clattering pots, muffled laughs. But out here, it's quieter. Just the water's rhythm and the occasional croak of a frog. You're about to sink into the scholarly debates over how well the priest's Sirius-based flood predictions actually held up. The night's calm, almost too calm, and its sleepy vibe wraps you like a soft blanket. But you're too curious about these cosmic arguments to doze off yet. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2500 BCE, Egyptian priests used Sirius's heliacal rising to predict the Nile's flood with impressive accuracy, aligning their 365-day calendar to within days of the river's surge, a system that sustained agriculture for centuries. You're picturing those merket-wielding priests from the temple, squinting at the horizon, their star charts guiding farmers' plows. But it wasn't foolproof. Floods could come early, late or not at all, and you're standing where the fallout would hit, where fields could turn to dust or swamp. The priest's system was a marvel, but nature didn't always play along. You kick at a clump of mud, watching it crumble. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests blamed flood flops on angry stars, claiming Sirius dimmed if the gods were miffed, and they'd burn extra incense to apologize. You're imagining that priest with the hippo amulet, frantically puffing smoke at the sky like he's signaling an alien mothership, and it's quietly absurd. Beats slathering on that crocodile dung sunscreen, though, right? You smirk. But the river's steady hum pulls you back, reminding you how much rode on those starry guesses. You wander along the bank, the water cool against your toes. The debates come down to precision versus faith. Some scholars say the priest's astronomy was near scientific, tracking Sirius with math that rivaled later cultures. Others argue it leaned hard on religion, with prayers and myths papering over gaps when floods went rogue. Historians still argue whether the Sirius system was a triumph of observation or a lucky streak propped up by rituals. Standing here, you're leaning toward a mix. The priests had solid data, but when the Nile didn't cooperate, they'd spin it as divine drama, keeping the pharaoh's rep intact. You're tempted to shout, "So, how often did they nail it?" But the frogs aren't answering, and the villagers are too busy. Instead, you crouch by the water, its ripples catching starlight. The priest's predictions worked often enough to build pyramids and feed millions, but the misses, weak floods, dry years, must have sparked grumbling. There's a joke tickling you. If the priest had a report card, it'd say A for effort, C for consistency. You swallow a chuckle, not wanting to spook a nearby heron. The debates feel alive here, where the Nile's whims could make or break a season, and you're starting to see why scholars still bicker over the starry math. You stand, brushing mud off your hands, and glance back at the village, its torches like tiny stars. The priest's system, flaws and all, kept Egypt humming. But out here, you're feeling the gap between their charts and the river's reality. The path leads back toward the temple, where the priests are probably prepping for a starry ritual. You're hooked on how they turn debates into action, ready to see how their midnight ceremonies tied the Nile's flood to Sirius's glow, and what it felt like when the stars and river finally aligned. You're slipping back toward the temple, the Nile's gentle slosh fading as you climb a sandy path lit by flickering torches. The air's thick with the scent of burning resin and warm stone, and the stars above feel like they're leaning closer, Sirius still teasing its big reveal. You're headed for a midnight ceremony, where priests will weave their starry predictions into rituals to coax the Nile's flood. The temple looms ahead, its walls glowing faintly, and the low hum of chants drifts out, wrapping you in a sleepy haze perfect for dozing. But you're too drawn to the cosmic drama unfolding to nod off just yet. Here's the mainstream fact. Around 2500 BCE, Egyptian priests held elaborate ceremonies during Sirius's heliacal rising, blending astronomy with offerings to gods like Isis and Osiris to ensure the Nile's flood arrived on cue. These weren't just prayers, they were public spectacles, tying the priest's star-watching to the river's surge. You're squeezing into a crowded courtyard now, where priests in white linen are circling a stone altar, their voices rising in a rhythmic drone. Villagers press close, clutching reed mats, their faces lit with hope and a touch of nerves. The flood's fate feels like it's being sealed right here, under the starry sky. You nudge past a farmer, catching a whiff of his sweaty tunic. Here's the quirky tidbit. During these rituals, priests sometimes sprinkled Nile water mixed with natron salt onto the altar, believing it woke the river like a divine espresso shot. You're picturing that priest with the merket, solemnly splashing salty water like he's seasoning a cosmic stew, and it's quietly ridiculous. Smells better than that crocodile dung sunscreen from the riverbank days, though, doesn't it? you smirk, but the crowd's focus keeps you from chuckling out loud. You're standing near the altar now, its surface etched with stars and reeds. The priests are chanting about Isis, her tears supposedly swelling the Nile when Sirius rises. They're not just stargazing, they're performing, linking their Merkit measurements to divine will. If the flood's strong, they're heroes. If it flops, they'll blame grumpy gods. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were heartfelt devotion or a slick way to hype the priest's power. Standing here, you're guessing it's both. The chants feel real, but they're also a show, keeping the crowd's faith in the starry system rock solid. You're tempted to whisper, "What if Sirius skips the party?" But the farmer next to you looks like he'd shush you hard. Instead, you shift your weight, your sandals gritty with courtyard dust, and let the ritual's rhythm sink in. The priests light a small brazier, its flames dancing like tiny stars, and the crowd murmurs entranced. There's a joke bubbling up. If this ceremony had a Yelp review, it'd be 5 stars for vibes, TBD for floods. You swallow a laugh, not wanting to break the spell. A priest raises a clay cup, offering it to the sky, and you're hooked, feeling the Nile's pulse in the chants and the crowd's quiet hope. You lean against a pillar, its stone cool under your palm, and watch the ceremony unfold. The priest's voices blend with the night's hum, and the Nile feels alive, waiting for Sirius to greenlight its surge. You're starting to see the ritual as a bridge, tying the temple's starry math to the village's muddy reality. The path back to the scribe's room tugs at you, where their star charts underpin this whole show. You're ready to peek at their work again, curious about the sleepy mistakes they might make under this cosmic pressure. You're back in the dim, flickering glow of an Egyptian temple, the air thick with the scent of papyrus and drying ink. It's late, way past the hour when any reasonable person would be snoring under a reed mat. But here you are, crouched beside a scribe who's hunched over a scroll, his eyes squinting at a star chart that's starting to look like a toddler's doodle. The Nile's flood is coming, and these guys are supposed to nail the timing by watching the stars. Spoiler alert, they don't always get it right, and tonight you're about to witness one of those glorious human moments when even the most revered priests mess it up. The scribe, let's call him Amunhotep because every third guy in Egypt seems to be, is scribbling furiously, trying to match the position of Sirius to the flood calendar. His reed pen scratches across the papyrus, leaving jagged lines that look more like a lightning bolt than a star's path. You lean closer, noticing his eyelids drooping. The guy's been at this for hours, fueled by nothing but barley beer and sheer terror of disappointing the pharaoh. You can't help but sympathize. Late-night deadlines are universal, whether it's 2500 BCE or your last-minute tax filing. Here's the mainstream fact. Egyptian scribes were meticulous, using detailed star observations to create a 365-day calendar that aligned the Nile's floods with Sirius's heliacal rising. This wasn't just astrology for kicks. It was the backbone of Egypt's agriculture. Get the flood date wrong, and farmers might plant too early, watching their crops drown, or too late, missing the fertile silt. The scribes' records, etched on papyrus or carved into temple walls, were so precise that they helped Egypt thrive for centuries. But precision doesn't mean perfection, and that's where things get juicy. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some scribes, especially the overworked ones like Amenhotep, occasionally nodded off mid-calculation, leading to hilarious errors. Archaeologists have found papyrus scraps with crossed-out star positions or wildly off flood dates, like one that predicted the Nile rising in the middle of the dry season. Imagine the priest's face when the river didn't budge. Maybe the gods changed their minds? You can almost hear the awkward cough. These mistakes weren't just oopsies. They could spark panic in villages waiting for the flood's life-giving waters. Yet somehow, the priests always spun it as divine will. Gotta admire the hustle. You watch Amunhotep's head bob dangerously close to the scroll. He jerks awake, muttering something about stupid stars moving too fast. You stifle a laugh, partly because you don't want to wake the high priest napping in the corner, and partly because you've been there staring at a screen at 2 a.m. praying your math checks out. The scribe rubs his eyes and tries again, but his latest line veers off, connecting Sirius to what looks like a random dot in the sky. Maybe it's a firefly that snuck into the temple. You're tempted to nudge him, but who are you to mess with history's blooper reel? Historians still argue whether these scribal errors were common or just rare flukes exaggerated by later chroniclers. Some say the Egyptians' star-based system was so robust that a few sleepy mistakes didn't derail the flood's timing. Others point to gaps in flood records, suggesting that miscalculations might have caused real chaos. Missed harvests, angry farmers, maybe even a grumpy pharaoh or two. The debate's open because, well, papyrus doesn't exactly come with an error log. What's clear is that the priests had to balance cosmic observation with human exhaustion. And sometimes, exhaustion won. You glance at the temple's star window, a narrow slit where priests peer at the night sky. Sirius is still there, twinkling like it's mocking Amunhotep's struggle. The Nile's flood is close. Everyone can feel it in the air, that heavy, expectant humidity. But if this guy keeps doodling, the farmers downstream might be in for a rough season. You imagine them standing in their fields, staring at a dry riverbed, muttering, "Really, priests? Again?" It's a reminder that even in a civilization obsessed with order, chaos sneaks in, usually around bedtime. The scribe's partner, a younger guy with marginally better posture, shuffles over with a fresh scroll. He whispers something, probably along the lines of, "Dude, you're embarrassing us in front of the gods." They start cross-checking the chart, their voices low but tinged with that universal panic of realizing you've screwed up. You can't help but grin. This is Egypt at its most human, not the polished statues or epic myths, but two tired guys trying not to tank the harvest because they misread a star. As they bicker, you notice the temple's walls, etched with older, more confident star maps. Those were probably done by scribes who got a full night's sleep, or at least had stronger beer. You remember the priest's quirky tools from earlier? Those funky star-measuring sticks that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi prop shop. Maybe Amunhotep should have double-checked his angles with one of those instead of trusting his bleary eyes. But hindsight's a jerk, isn't it? The night drags on, and you're starting to feel the weight of it yourself. The temple's quiet, save for the scribe's muttering and the distant croak of frogs by the Nile. You wonder how many times scenes like this played out. Overworked scribes, flickering lamps, and the fate of a civilization hanging on a few shaky lines of ink. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And honestly, there's something comforting about knowing that even ancient Egyptians had their "I can't even" moments. Amunhotep finally straightens up, his new chart looking slightly less like a drunk spider's web. Maybe he's got it right this time. Or maybe the Nile will flood anyway, and the gods will get the credit. Either way, you're ready to slip out of this temple and let these guys deal with their cosmic paperwork. The stars are still up there, doing their thing, and the Nile's still waiting to do hers. For now, you're just happy to watch history stumble along, one sleepy scribe at a time. You're standing on a low hill overlooking the Nile, the river glinting under a sky dusted with stars. The air feels lighter now, like the world's exhaling after the tense scribal drama you witnessed in the temple. The flood's coming soon. You can sense it in the way the reeds quiver and the frogs get extra chatty. But tonight you're not here to crunch numbers or dodge sleepy scribes. You're here to soak in something bigger. How this starry dance with the Nile shaped Egypt into the powerhouse it became. It's not just about floods or crops. It's about a whole civilization leaning into the cosmos like it's their personal GPS. Picture yourself kicking off your sandals, toes sinking into the cool, silty earth. The Nile's been doing its thing for millennia, and those priests with their star charts? They weren't just predicting floods, they were weaving Egypt's identity. The mainstream fact is undeniable. The Nile's annual flooding, timed by Sirius's Heliacal rising, was the engine of Egyptian agriculture. Without it, no surplus grain, no grand temples, no pharaohs strutting around like they owned the sun. The star flood connection gave Egypt stability, letting it build pyramids while other societies were still figuring out how to not starve. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder if modern planners could learn a thing or two from a 4,000-year-old river. But here's the quirky bit. Some Egyptians believed the Nile's floods carried literal starlight, not just poetic fluff. Village storytellers swore the river glowed faintly at night during flood season, as if Sirius itself was leaking into the water. No scientific proof, of course, but try telling that to a farmer who's seen his fields triple in yield after a starry flood. You glance at the river now, half expecting to spot a shimmer. Nope, just moonlight, and your imagination running wild. Still, it's a charming idea, like the Nile's got a side hustle as a cosmic light show. You wander closer to the riverbank, where a crumbling stone stela juts from the soil. It's carved with hieroglyphs praising the flood's divine timing. You can't read them, but you bet they're hyping up some pharaoh who took credit for the star's hard work. Typical boss move. This stela's a reminder of how deeply the Nile's rhythm sank into Egypt's bones. Temples aligned with Sirius, festivals timed to its rising, even kids' names inspired by stars. It's like the whole culture was one big fan club for the cosmos. You chuckle, imagining a modern equivalent. Hey, let's name our kid Sirius, and throw a party every time Orion shows up. Historians still argue whether the starry flood system was Egypt's secret sauce or just one piece of a bigger puzzle. Some say the priests' star watching gave Egypt an edge, letting it plan harvests with near military precision. Others argue the real magic was social. Pharaohs and priests used the flood's cosmic hype to unify people, like a divine PR campaign. Look, the gods love us. The stars prove it. Now go build my obelisk. The debate's open because Egypt's success had so many moving parts. Geography, trade, sheer stubbornness. But you can't deny the stars and the Nile were the ultimate power couple. You sit on the stela, feeling its weathered edges under your palms. The Nile's current murmurs, carrying silt that'll soon blanket fields downstream. You think back to the farmers you saw, ankle-deep in mud, praying the priest's calculations were on point. Or the scribes, bleary-eyed, trying not to botch the star charts. Even the pharaoh, with his lofty decrees, was just a guy hoping the gods didn't ghost him. It all ties back to this river and those stars. A system so elegant it feels like cheating. No wonder Egypt lasted thousands of years. When your whole society vibes with the universe, you're playing on easy mode. A breeze picks up, smelling faintly of wet earth. You spot a flicker in the sky. Sirius, winking like it knows you're thinking about it. The flood's legacy isn't just in the crops or the temples. It's in how it made people feel connected to something vast. You've seen the rituals, the myths, the quirky tools, and yeah, the occasional scribal faceplant. But it all adds up to a culture that looked at the stars and said, "We got this." You're not gonna lie, it's kinda inspiring in a sleepy, ancient way. Like, maybe you should start checking the stars before your next big decision, or at least before ordering takeout. As you linger, you notice a distant village lighting up for a pre-flood festival. Torches bob, voices carry over the water, and you bet they're toasting to Sirius and the Nile's cosmic pact. You're tempted to crash the party, but your eyelids are getting heavy and the river's lullaby is doing its job. The Nile's legacy isn't just in the past, it's in this moment, where you're sitting, half dozing, feeling the weight of a civilization that bet it all on a star and a river. And won. You lean back, letting the stela prop you up. The stars are still there, same as they were when the priests first clocked them. The Nile's still flowing, same as it did when those farmers bet their lives on it. It's a quiet kind of epic, the kind that doesn't need fanfare. You're starting to get why this worked as a bedtime story. History doesn't get more soothing than a river and a star taking care of business. year after year. You're sprawled on the soft, damp grass by the Nile, the river's gentle lapping blending with the hum of distant crickets. The stars above are starting to blur, not because of clouds, but because your eyes are heavy, lulled by the warm night and the weight of Egypt's cosmic story. Sirius still glints, but it's softer now, like it's ready to clock out after guiding the flood season. The Nile feels quieter too, as if it's saving its energy for the big surge. You're not just here to watch a river flow. You're sinking into the final dreamy rhythm of a civilization that danced with the stars. The air carries a faint whiff of mud and blooming lotus, grounding you in this ancient moment. The mainstream fact is simple but staggering. The Nile's flood cycle, synced with Sirius's rising, didn't just feed Egypt. It shaped its entire worldview. Priests didn't just predict floods. They crafted a culture where every farmer, scribe, and pharaoh felt tethered to the cosmos. This wasn't about one good harvest. It was about thousands of years of trust in a river and a star. You let that sink in, marveling at how something so practical could feel so mystical, like the universe was sending Egypt a yearly postcard. Now, for the quirky tidbit. Some priests believed the Nile's floodwaters held memories of the stars. Not in a sci-fi way, but as a poetic truth. Villagers would whisper that the river's silt sparkled with celestial dust, carrying the wisdom of the gods. You squint at the water, half hoping to catch a glimmer. Nothing, just ripples catching moonlight. But you get the appeal. It's like thinking your morning coffee has a pinch of stardust. Makes the daily grind feel a bit more epic, doesn't it? You chuckle softly, imagining a priest trying to sell that idea to a grumpy farmer. You shift, pulling your knees up, and notice the horizon glowing faintly. Dawn's not far off. Historians still argue whether the priest's star-based flood system was more spiritual than scientific. Some say it was pure astronomy, a triumph of observation over superstition. Others argue the rituals and myths were the real glue, making people believe the floods were divine gifts, not just lucky timing. The debate's open because, honestly, it's hard to untangle faith from math when both kept a civilization alive. You don't mind the mystery. It's like trying to figure out why you feel calm right now, with the Nile murmuring and the stars fading. You think back to the scribe's sleepy fumbles, the farmer's muddy hopes, that one pharaoh who probably oversold his cosmic clout. It all feels so human, so relatable, even across millennia. The Nile's still here, same as it was when Amenhotep botched his star chart. The stars are still up there, same as when priests aligned temples to catch their light. You're not solving any grand puzzles tonight, but you're part of something timeless, lying here, letting the river's rhythm pull you under. It's the kind of history that doesn't shout, just whispers, steady and sure. A soft breeze brushes your face, carrying the scent of wet earth. You're tempted to stay, to see the flood arrive, but your body's ready to drift. The Nile doesn't need you to watch it work. It's been at this forever. You close your eyes, picturing the fields downstream, soon to be blanketed in rich silt. The farmers will cheer, the priests will nod sagely, and Sirius will keep twinkling. Business as usual. You grin at the thought. Egypt's ultimate power move was making the universe its alarm clock. Wind down. Now let's ease you into sleep, nice and slow. Picture the Nile stretching out before you, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting a sky where the stars are dimming, one by one. You're not in a rush, not chasing floods or scribbling charts. You're just here, breathing in the cool, earthy air, letting the river's soft ripples carry your thoughts away. Each breath feels lighter, each sound, the water, the crickets, the faint rustle of reeds, wraps you in a gentle cocoon. The Nile's done its job for centuries, and tonight it's doing one more, helping you drift. Feel your shoulders soften, your mind unclench. The stars are slipping below the horizon, and you're slipping too, into a quiet, boundless calm. Let the river hold you. Let the night dissolve. You're safe. You're still. and the world can wait. Sleep now, deeply, wrapped in the Nile's ancient lullaby.